Hey guys, I'm going to be talking about the book called The Glass Castle by Jeannette Walls, and here's the cover. So the book explores the struggles of a family who lives in poverty while experiencing the hardships of growing up with parents who are often neglectful, irresponsible, and sometimes affected with alcoholism. The parents are rebellious and reject societal and government rules, where moving place to place was their way of avoiding responsibility and confrontation from the government. As a result, I noticed the kids were too mature for their age at the start, and also was really surprisingly really smart. Um, well, not really surprisingly, but you know what I mean. But despite living in poverty, the kids allowed they also allowed the kids to their children to gain resilience, survival, and love to their parents at such an early age, which I found very beautiful. So what do I like about the book? I enjoyed the glass castle because I could personally relate to it. Growing up in the Philippines, I experienced poverty, which helps me appreciate the simple things in life. And this book showed me how poverty can look different in another country. Although my parents were not neglectful, my experiences allowed me to connect emotionally with the story. So this book explores Jeanette Wall's trauma in a powerful way, and her writing makes the reader feel like they're experiencing everything with her. One part that stood out to me was in page 238, when Jeanette decides to move to New York City instead of staying for her father's promise to build the glass castle. This moment shows her growth as she chooses her future and education over his unrealistic plans, which I found very intriguing and powerful because now she's not getting manipulated by her dad. This shows Jeanette Walls has grown up and wants something for herself now. So I'm gonna read the page 238. Um, So I followed him into the living room where he spread the papers on the drafting table. They were his old blueprints for the glass castle, all stained and dog-eared. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen them. We'd stopped talking about the glass castle once the foundation we dug up was filled with garbage. I think I finally worked out on how to deal with the lack of sunlight on the hillside, Dad said. It involved installing a specially curved mirror in the solar cells. But why he wanted to talk to me about the plans for my room. Now that Lori's gone, he said, I'm reconfiguring the layout and your room will be a lot bigger. Dad's hands trembled slightly as he unrolled different blueprints. He had drawn frontal views, side views, and aerial views of the glass castle. He had diagrammed the wiring and the plumbing. He had drawn the interiors of rooms and labeled them and specified their dimensions down to the inches in his precise, blocky handwriting. I stared at the plans. Dad, I said, you'll never build the glass castle. Are you saying you don't have faith in your old man? Even if you do, I'll be gone. In less than 3 months, I'm leaving for New York City. What I was thinking was you don't have to go right away, Dad said. I could stay and graduate from Welsh High and go to Bluefield State as Miss Katona had suggested, then get a job at the Welsh Daily News. It helped me with the articles like he'd helped with my piece on Chuck Yeager, and I'll build the glass castle, I swear. We'll all live in it together. It'll be a lot better than any apartment you'll ever find in New York City. I can guarantee that. Dad, I said, as soon as I finish classes, I'm getting on the next bus out of here. If the bus is stuck running, I'll hitchhike. I'll walk if I have to. Go ahead and build the glass castle, but don't do it for me. Dad rolled up the blueprints and walked out of the room. A minute later, I heard him scrambling down the mountainside. So yeah, this passage was I found it really powerful. Thank you. Moving on to my two favorite passages of the book. So I picked these two passages for a reason where I feel those stand out to me because of how beautifully written they are. So the first passage is on page 40, when Jeanette's father cannot afford to buy her a Christmas gift and instead gives her a star from the sky for her to cherish forever. This moment shows how even in poverty, he expresses love through imagination and meaning rather than material things. Despite living in poverty, I found I found him really amazing without his alcoholism, or if he wasn't under the influence, where I wonder what could have been if her father was never an alcoholic. Would they still live in the situation that they are currently in? Alright, that's my, yeah. So my first passage is on page 40. Let's start here. Dad grinned. That's Venus, he said. Venus was only a planet, he went on, and pretty dinky compared to real stars. She looked bigger and brighter because she was much more closer than the stars. Poor old Venus didn't even make her own light, Dad said. She shone only from reflected lights. He explained to me that planets glowed because reflected light was constant and stars twinkled because they're light pulsed. I like it anyway, I said. I had admired Venus even before that Christmas. You could see it in early evenings glowing on the western horizon, and if you got up early, you could still see it in the morning, after all the stars had disappeared. What the hell? Dad said. It's Christmas. You can have planets if you want. and he gave me Venus. That evening, over Christmas dinner, we all discussed outer space. Dad explains light years and black holes and quasars and told us about the special qualities of Betelgeuse, Rigel, and Venus. Betelgeuse was a red star in the shoulder of the constellation Orion. It was one of the largest stars you could see in the sky, hundreds of times bigger than the sun. It had burned brightly for millions of years and would soon become a supernova and burn out. I got upset that Lori had chosen a clunker of a star, but Dad explained that soon meant hundreds of thousands of years when you were talking about the stars. Rigel was a blue star smaller than Betelgeuse, Dad said, but even brighter. It was also an Orion. It was his left foot, which seemed appropriate because Brian was an extra fast runner. Venus didn't have any moons or satellites or even a magnetic field, but it did have an atmosphere sort of similar to Earth's, except it was super hot, about 100 times degrees or more. So, Dad said, when the sun starts to burn out and Earth turns cold, everyone here might want to move to Venus to get warm, and they'll have to get permission from your descendants first. We laughed about all the kids who believed in Santa myths and got nothing for Christmas but a bunch of cheap plastic toys. Years from now, when all the junk they got is broken and long forgotten, Dad said, you'll still have your stars. So yeah, that passage was really beautiful because I do agree that they could have their stars forever, which were spoiler when after her dad's death, maybe she'll find the star once in her lifetime and tell her children about how her dad gave her that star, Venus. And moving on to my next passage is on page 96, when Jeanette's sister, Lori, is diagnosed with myopia, which you can only see objects close or nearby. And she's finally able to see the world clearly after receiving her glasses, where I found the way Jeannette describes experiencing this moment with her sister is very powerful and emotional. When their mother tries on the glasses, she's briefly shocked by how clearly she can see, but she clearly takes them off and seems unwilling to truly look through her children's eyes. I found this moment meaningful because it acts as a parallel, symbolizing how their mother often refuses to understand her children's struggles, which may explain her neglectful behavior. So let's go on page 96. All right, I'm gonna start here. No, sorry, Mom said. She didn't approve of her glasses. If you had weak eyes, Mom believed they needed exercise to get strong. The way she saw it, glasses were like crutches. They prevented people with feeble eyes from learning to see the world on their own. She said people had been trying to get her to wear glasses for years, and she had refused. But the nurse sent another note saying Lori couldn't send Emerson unless she wore glasses, and the school would pay for them, so Mom gave in. When the glasses were ready, we all went down to the optometrist. The lenses were so thick they made Lori's eyes look big and bugged out, like fish eyes. She kept swiveling her head and around and up and down. And up and down. What's the matter? I asked. Instead of answering, Lori ran outside. I followed her. She was standing in the parking lot, gazing in awe at the trees, the houses, and the office building behind them. You see that tree over there? She said, pointing at a sycamore about 100 feet away. I nodded. I can only see that tree. I cannot only see that tree. I can see the individual leaves on it. She looked at me triumphantly. Can you see them? I nodded. She didn't seem to believe me. The individual leaves, I mean? The individual leaves, I mean, not just the branches, but each little leaf. I nodded. Lori looked at me and then burst into tears. On the way home, she kept seeing for the first time all these things that most everyone else had stopped noticing because they'd seen them every day. She read street signs and billboards aloud. She pointed out starlings perched on the telephone wires. We went into the bank and we stared up at the vaulted ceilings and described the octagonal patterns. At home, Lori insisted that I try on her glasses. They would blur my vision as much as they corrected her, she said, so I'll be able to see things as she always had. I put on the glasses and the world dissolved into fuzzy, blotchy shapes. I took a few steps and banged my chin on the coffee table, then I realized why Lori didn't like to go exploring as much as Brian and I did. She couldn't see. Lori wanted Mom to try on the glasses too. Mom stepped them on and blinking, looked around the room. She studied one of her own paintings quietly, then handed the glasses back to Lori. Did you see better? I asked. I wouldn't say better, Mom answered. I'll say different. Maybe you should get a pair, Mom. I like the world just fine the way I see it, she said. But Lori loved seeing the world clearly. She started compulsively drawing and painting all the wondrous things she was discovering, like the way each curved tile on Emerson's roof cast its own curved shadow on the tile below, and the way the setting sun painted the underbellies of the clouds pink but left the piled up tops purple. Not long after Lori got her glasses, she decided she wanted to be an artist like Mom. So yeah, that was actually I found that really powerful. So lastly, what does this book teach you? This book taught me that even while in poverty, people can still find ways to make their stories beautiful through the words they chose and how they express their experiences. As I mentioned earlier, it was especially interesting for me to see different perspectives on poverty, particularly from a country often described as the American dream. So This passage stood out to me. It's on page 280, which is a spoiler, which is the last page of the book. This passage describes how Jeannette grieves after her father's death, and her response was very different from what I expected. Rather than grieving in a traditional way, she keeps herself constantly distracted because being alone would emotionally break her. She discovers a new passion for ice skating, and the way she describes the feeling of ice skating is both beautiful and powerful. I found this moment meaningful because it shows how grief can take many forms and how Jeannette finds healing in her own way. So let's go on page 280. All right, so this is when her dad died. This is a month. This is months that followed. So in the months that followed, I found myself always wanting to be somewhere other than where I was. If I was at work, I'd wish I were home. If I was in the apartment, I couldn't wait to get out of it. If a taxi I had hailed was stuck in traffic for over a minute, I got out and walked. I felt best when I was in the move, going someplace rather than being there. I took up ice skating. I rose early in the morning and made my way through this quiet, dawn-lit streets to the rink where I laced up my skates so tightly my feet dropped. I welcomed the numbing cold and even the jaw of my falls on the hard, wet ice. The fast-paced, repetitive maneuvers distracted me, and sometimes I went back at night to skate again, returning home only when it was late and I was exhausted. It took me a while to realize that just being in the move wasn't enough. That I needed to reconsider everything. So yeah, that passage was also beautiful, and just this book itself was really beautiful, and I actually enjoyed reading the book. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a good night.